Tonight we wander away from the glow of city lights and the relentless pace of modern life, slipping instead into the misty, cool air of a 1920s Japanese riverbank at dawn. You feel the coarse, damp gravel under your bare feet, the chill of the night not yet burned away by the sun. You hear the gentle, persistent rush of the river, a sound so constant it becomes the very heartbeat of this place. The air smells of wet stone, of cold earth, and of the faint, green scent of the water weeds. You see the silhouettes of other women from the village, their figures emerging from the grey light like ghosts, each carrying a bundle of the week's soiled linens and clothes. Your back already aches in anticipation, a dull protest against the hours of bending and lifting to come. This is not a gentle hobby. This is a full morning of intense, physical labor, a weekly reckoning with dirt and grime that will leave your hands raw, your knees bruised, and your muscles singing with fatigue. You probably won't survive this with your modern sensibilities intact, let alone your soft, uncalloused hands. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down the well-worn path, your Jita sandals scraping against the stone. The basket balanced on your head is a familiar weight, a woven universe of cotton, hemp, and sweat. This is the unassuming magic of laundry day, a ritual as old as the hills that surround your small village. It's a magic not of wands and spells, but of cold water, coarse soap, and the collective strength of every woman here. You find your spot, a patch of flat, smooth stones that your mother, and probably her mother before her, claimed for their own. The river here is just deep enough, the current just swift enough to carry the suds and dirt away downstream, a convenient disposal system that nobody questions. You set your basket down with a soft grunt, the sound lost in the chorus of splashes and the low murmur of greetings. No one is overly cheerful. This is work, pure and simple, but there's a quiet camaraderie in the shared burden. As you untie your bundle, the first historical fact of the day presses in on you. This is the Taisho era, a brief, fascinating window of time between 1912 and 1926, often called Taisho democracy for its flirtation with liberal politics and Western culture. But out here, in the rural Inaka, those waves of modernization are faint ripples. The emperor is a distant figure, the politics of Tokyo a world away. Your world is defined by the seasons, the rice harvest, and the relentless cycle of domestic chores. As you shake out a work yukata, is that for all the communal spirit, the washing of certain intimate garments, specifically fundoshi loincloths for men, was often done discreetly at home, or by the men themselves at a separate spot, a small, unspoken nod to modesty in this otherwise public display of household labor. You wade into the water, the cold a sharp, breathtaking shock that travels straight up your spine. You gasp, and the woman next to you, Obasan Fumi with her kind eyes and deeply lined face, offers a sympathetic, gap-toothed smile. This is her element. She has been doing this since she was a child, her hands now tough as leather, her movements economical and precise. You watch as she soaks a heavy hemp work jacket, swirling it in the water with a practiced twist of her wrists. Historians still argue whether the intense social bonding of these riverbank gatherings, this women's sphere, actually afforded them a form of subtle power and autonomy within their communities, or if it simply reinforced their confinement to relentless, unpaid domestic toil. As you plunge your own first garment into the icy flow, the debate feels abstract. The only power you're concerned with right now is the power to get the ground in dirt from your husband's work trousers out before your fingers go completely numb. The sun finally crests the hills, painting the river in streaks of gold, and the real work begins. The initial shock of the water has subsided into a dull, throbbing cold that you've mostly learned to ignore, a necessary numbness for the task at hand. Your focus now narrows to the tools laid out on your personal patch of riverbank, a kit that would baffle anyone from our time with its stark simplicity. There are no plastic bottles of brightly colored liquid, no machines with gentle cycles. Your arsenal consists of a few trusted, tangible items. The most prominent are the wooden buckets, their staves swollen tight from the water, one for the initial soak and another for the precious, soapy wash water you'll create. Next to them lies the washboard, a corrugated wooden plank that looks deceptively primitive. Its ridges are the teeth of this operation, the abrasive surface against which fabric will be scrubbed into submission. But the true star of the show, the alchemical heart of the entire endeavor, is the soap. You don't have a neatly wrapped, store-bought bar. What you have is a rough, ugly, grayish-brown lump that smells faintly of wood smoke and something vaguely animalic. This is your second, or more accurately, your local, homemade version of it. You pick it up. It's heavy and gritty, leaving a slight, greasy film on your fingers. This is where the magic, and the sheer physicality, truly begins. You'll learn to work with this unassuming lump, to understand its temperament, its strengths, and its brutal weaknesses. It's a far cry from the lavender-scented, moisturizing enriched promises of our era. This soap has one job, and it does it with a kind of violent efficacy. The process of creating this cleaning agent is a piece of chemistry that farmers here have understood for generations, even if they wouldn't call it saponification. The base of your soap is animal fat, usually rendered from pigs or cows, a precious byproduct of a life where nothing is wasted. This fat is then combined with lye, which isn't bought in a bottle but created from wood ash. 4 days, water is slowly dripped through a barrel of ash, leaching out the potassium hydroxide, creating a caustic solution that can burn skin on contact. The combination of the fat and this lye water, through a slow, careful cooking process, transforms into soap and glycerin. There's no fancy purification here. The glycerin stays in, the ash doesn't fully dissolve, and you're left with a product that is unapologetically harsh. The specific type of wood used for the ash could change the soap's properties. Ash from broadleaf trees like oak was often preferred over pine, as it was thought to create a harder, longer-lasting bar with a slightly less pungent smell. You take your lump and your washboard and you get to work. You rub the soap vigorously against the wet, coarse weave cotton of a work shirt, generating a thin, gray, unsatisfying lather. Then, you press the fabric against the washboard and begin to scrub, back and forth, the shish-shish-shish sound joining the symphony of similar noises up and down the riverbank. It's a monotonous, shoulder-straining rhythm. The mainstream historical fact that makes this labor even more impressive is that by the 1920s, Japan was a rapidly industrializing nation. In the major cities like Osaka and Tokyo, mechanized textile mills were producing vast quantities of affordable, Western-style clothing, and commercial, factory-made soaps were becoming available in department stores. But out here, the economy is still largely local and agrarian. Purchasing a commercial soap bar would be an unnecessary extravagance when you have the fat from your own pig and the ash from your own hearth. Historians still argue whether the continued reliance on these traditional, labor-intensive methods in the countryside was a conscious choice rooted in a values system that prized self-sufficiency and thrift, or if it was simply a stark economic necessity, a symptom of the growing wealth gap between the urban and rural populations during the Taisho period. As you scrub, your knuckles scraping against the wooden ridges, the debate feels academic. The choice is simple: use the soap you made, or wear dirty clothes. There is no third option. The lather, what little there is, turns a murky brown as the dirt surrenders. It's not pleasant, it's not easy, but it is undeniably, effectively real. You glance at Obasan Fumi, who is using a smooth, worn river stone to pound a heavy futon cover, her movements a steady, powerful drumbeat. You realize the soap is just the first step. For the really tough jobs, you're going to need to get even more physical. The thin, grey lather from the soap is a starting point, a declaration of war. But the real battle against the ground and dirt of a life of labor is won not with chemistry alone, but with pure, percussive force. You set the washboard aside, your fingers stiff and pruned, and select your weapon, a smooth, heavy river stone, worn oval by decades of use. The garment, a pair of your husband's indigo-dyed trousers, stiff with dried mud and sweat, is now thoroughly soaked and soaked. You drape it over a larger, flatter rock that sits half submerged in the water, a natural anvil. Then, you begin to beat it. The first impact is a solid, satisfying thwack that sends a spray of dirty water droplets flying. You lift the fabric, reposition it, and bring the stone down again. Thwack. It's a rhythm as old as cloth itself. Lift, position, pound. Lift, position, pound. This isn't mindless violence, it's a skilled, rhythmic art. You learn to listen to the sound. A wet, slapping sound means the fabric is too waterlogged. You need to wring it out slightly. A dry, papery thud means it needs more water. The perfect strike produces a deep, resonant thump that you feel all the way up your arm, a sound that promises the expulsion of dirt from the very core of the fibers. Your shoulders and back take the brunt of the force, a steady, jarring impact that will leave you sore by midday. But there's a strange, primal catharsis in it. With every swing, you're not just cleaning cloth. You're pounding out the week's frustrations, the weariness, the grime of the fields. This is your gym, your therapy session, and your laundry room, all rolled into one icy, exhausting river. The mainstream historical context for this backbreaking work is the nature of the textiles themselves. While the cities were increasingly wearing machine-spun cotton, much of the rural clothing was still made from sturdier, homespun hemp or acer, linen. These fibers were incredibly durable but also notoriously stiff and rough, and they held onto dirt with a tenacity that gentle scrubbing could never overcome. The pounding action wasn't just about dislodging dirt, it was also about physically breaking down and softening the stiff fibers, making the fabric more pliable and comfortable to wear until the next washing. It was a form of mechanical conditioning, a necessity for survival in work clothes that had to withstand everything from brambles to kneeling in rice paddies. This process involves the specific stones themselves. Not just any river rock would do. The ideal pounding stone was smooth, without sharp edges that could tear the fabric, but also dense and heavy enough to deliver a proper impact. Women often had their favorite stones, passed down or claimed through informal tradition, and you'd recognize a skilled laundress by the consistent, powerful rhythm of her strikes, a personal signature in the collective noise. Some even believed that stones from certain parts of the river, where the water ran fastest, had a special quality, a living spirit from the current that made them more effective at driving out impurity. A small, animist superstition clinging to the edges of a practical chore. As you fall into your own rhythm, the thwack 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 blending with the dozens of others along the bank, you notice the social dynamics at play. The younger women, like yourself, often pound with aggressive, almost frantic energy, trying to get through the pile as quickly as possible. The older women, like Obasan Fumi, have a slower, more measured, and infinitely more efficient pace. Their strikes are fewer, but more precise, each one delivering a maximum of force with a minimum of wasted movement. Historians still argue whether this communal labor, this pound party, actually reinforced a rigid social hierarchy among the women, with the older, more experienced members wielding a soft authority, or if it fostered a more egalitarian sense of shared purpose that temporarily flattened social distinctions. From where you stand, your arms aching, you see both. You defer to Fumi's knowledge, but you also share in the collective groan when a young mother further upstream loses her grip on her stone and it disappears into the deeper water with a plop, followed by a chorus of sympathetic laughter and offers of spare rocks. The rhythm resumes, a heartbeat of community, pounding the dirt out of the weak and the isolation out of the soul. The rhythmic pounding is the bass line, but the true melody of the riverbank is the constant, flowing stream of conversation. As your body settles into the automatic, physical work, your mind and ears are freed, and you tune into the social network buzzing around you, a network powered not by electricity, but by soap suds and shared burdens. This is the village's live news feed, its private messaging service, and its communal therapy session, all happening in real time, with no filter. The initial, quiet focus of the dawn has given way to a vibrant, overlapping chatter that rises and falls like the sound of the river itself. You are no longer just a laundress. You are a node in this ancient, organic information system. To your right, young Michiko, newly married and still bright-eyed, is whispering to her friend about her husband's snoring, a complaint that is met with giggles and knowing nods. It's a small, intimate detail, but it's a thread in the larger tapestry of village life. Further down, a more serious discussion is underway about the upcoming village council meeting, debating whether funds should be allocated to repair the bridge near the Tanaka's farm or to deepen the communal well. You hear snippets of names, of proposed contributions of rice or labor, the granular politics of a small community where every decision touches everyone. This is where public opinion is shaped, where alliances are subtly reinforced, and where dissent is quietly, but effectively, quashed through the gentle pressure of sidelong glances and murmured asides. A mainstream historical fact that underpins this scene is the structure of the baraku, or hamlet, in rural Taisho, Japan. These were not just collections of houses. They were tightly knit, self-governing communities where mutual assistance, known as yui, was essential for survival. The laundry gathering was an extension of this principle. While the men might collaborate on building a house or harvesting a field, this riverside was the women's domain for practicing their own form of yu, sharing soap, helping wring out heavy futon covers, watching each other's children, and, most importantly, sharing information. The news exchanged here was often more immediate and more relevant to daily life than anything printed in a far-off Tokyo newspaper. And then there's the gossip. It's the spicy, fringe tidbit that makes the time pass faster. Old Mrs. Yamada, her back bent like a question mark, leans in and confides in a raspy voice that she saw the son from the wealthy landlord's family slipping out after dark, heading not towards the fields, but towards the widow's cottage on the hill. The women around her click their tongues, their expressions a mixture of disapproval and keen interest. This isn't just salacious rumor-mongering, it's a form of social policing. In a community without a formal police force, reputation is everything, and the riverbank is the supreme court of public opinion. A reputation for laziness, for dishonesty, or for impropriety, once cemented here, could dog a family for generations, affecting marriage prospects and business dealings. You contribute your own piece of news, mentioning that your cousin from the next town over said the price of silk cocoons has dropped again, a piece of economic intelligence that is met with grim nods. Historians still argue whether these female-centric communication networks ultimately served to uphold the conservative, patriarchal social order by enforcing its norms, or if they provided a clandestine space for women to exert real influence, shape events, and offer each other subversive support away from the ears of men. As you listen to the mix of practical planning, heartfelt sympathy for a sick child, and sharp-edged gossip, you realize it's both. It's a system that maintains the community's fabric, sometimes by mending it, and sometimes by pulling tightly on its threads to keep everyone in their place. You feel a gentle nudge. It's Obasan Fumi, offering you a dipper of cool water from her gourd. The sun is getting high, she says, her eyes crinkling. The talk is good, but the indigo won't wait forever. The social network pauses for a moment, as your attention, and the attention of several others, turns toward the most precious and most temperamental member of your laundry day community, the indigo vat. Obasan Fumi's mention of the indigo is like a shift in the wind, changing the entire atmosphere of your little work group. The general chatter continues downriver, but your immediate circle falls into a more focused, almost reverent silence. The communal indigo vat isn't just a tool, it's a living entity, a shared treasure that requires a collective, careful touch. You help Fumi lift the heavy wooden lid from the large ceramic pot that's kept in the shade of a willow tree, its contents hidden from the sun. The smell that wafts out is immediate and potent, a deep, earthy, slightly foul aroma, like a combination of wet soil, rotting leaves, and something unmistakably organic. To the uninitiated, it smells like something has died. To you, it smells like life, like color, like the very blue of the sky captured in a clay jar. This is the secret heart of the village's color. While wealthy urbanites might be wearing imported Western dyes, your world is painted in the deep, enduring blue of Japan blue, derived from the ai plant. The vat before you is a masterpiece of low-tech fermentation. Inside is a soupy, murky liquid where the leaves of the Pausicaria plant have been composting for weeks, sometimes months, in a mixture of water, wood ash lye, and sake bran, which acts as a nutrient for the bacteria. These microorganisms are the true artisans here. They consume the plant matter and, in the absence of oxygen, reduce the indigo tin within into a soluble form called leucoindigo. It's a fragile, anaerobic world. Introducing too much oxygen, by stirring too vigorously, or letting the vat get too cold, can kill the bacteria, turning the precious blue vat into a useless, oxidized green sludge. Maintaining it is a constant, nervous dance with nature. The mainstream historical fact that elevates this smelly pot to a position of importance is that indigo was one of Japan's most significant cash crops for centuries, and its cultivation and processing were a major rural industry. By the 1920s, while synthetic indigo from Germany was beginning to make inroads, the natural product was still prized for its superior color fastness and depth, especially for the workwear of farmers and fishermen. Your village's vat represents a direct link to that economic tradition, a small-scale, cooperative version of a once vast trade. Dyeing a garment wasn't a weekly chore like washing, it was a special, periodic event, and the vat's management was often entrusted to the most experienced women, like Fumi, whose knowledge was a form of village capital. It was often considered to have its own spirit, a kami of the dye pot. Certain taboos were strictly observed. You never peered into the vat with a scowl on your face, as negative energy could sour the batch. Some believed that a woman who was menstruating should not participate in the dyeing, as her body's imbalance could disrupt the delicate fermentation. It was less about misogyny and more about a belief in the vat's sensitive, living nature, vulnerable to any kind of impurity or strong emotional charge. Success with the vat was a sign of harmony, of being in right relation with the unseen forces of nature. Now, the careful work begins. You wring out the faded, pale blue work jacket you've brought, ensuring it is uniformly damp. Fumi, her arms protected by old rags, gently parts the scummy, iridescent film on the surface of the vat, the flower of the indigo, and you submerge the jacket into the yellowish-green liquid beneath. You hold it under, swishing it gently to avoid creating bubbles, for a count that Fumi determines by feel and experience. When she nods, you pull it out. The magic hasn't happened yet. The fabric comes out a disappointing, sickly yellow-green. But as you hold it up, exposing it to the air, the oxygen works its transformation. Before your eyes, the yellow-green begins to deepen, shifting to a rich blue right there in your hands, as if you're pulling the color directly from the sky. It's a moment of genuine, breathless wonder every single time. Historians still argue whether the widespread, almost ritualized knowledge of indigo dyeing in rural communities like yours represented a sophisticated, female-led preservation of complex biochemical processes, or if it was simply a set of superstitious recipes followed without a true understanding of the underlying science. As you watch the color bloom on the fabric, the line between science and magic feels beautifully, irrelevantly thin. You will dip and oxidize this jacket multiple times to achieve the deep, inky blue that will protect its wearer from the sun and symbolize his connection to this land. It's a slow, patient art, a world away from the frantic pounding of the rocks, a reminder that some of the most beautiful things require not force, but faith and careful tending. The indigo vat, with its living, breathing alchemy, is a communal climax, but the laundry day's rhythm now settles into a slower, more personal cadence. The sun is high overhead, warming your back and drying the newly rinsed and pounded clothes you've laid out on the grassy bank. The heavy labor is done. Your hands, raw from soap and cold water, now crave a different kind of work, one of fine motor skill and patience. You find a spot in a patch of dappled sunlight, your basket of cleaned, damp laundry beside you, and from a small, woven pouch, you produce your mending kit. This is where the battle against entropy continues, not with brute force, but with a needle and thread. This isn't a rushed, frustrated chore of throwing away a sock with a hole. This is mending as mindfulness, a quiet, almost meditative practice. You take your husband's work sock, the heel-worn tissue paper thin. You feel the texture of the undamaged wool, the shape of his foot still implied in the stretch of the knit. You select a patch from your scrap bag, a softer piece of cloth from an old, worn-out yukata. You don't just slap it on. You carefully trim it to shape, your scissors making soft, precise snips. Then, you thread your needle, the act itself a small ritual of focus. The first push of the needle through the cloth is a satisfying puncture, a beginning. The mainstream historical context for this is the pervasive culture of motenai, a concept that translates roughly to what a waste, but carries a much deeper sense of regret over the loss of an object's intrinsic value. In a rural, subsistence economy, nothing was casually discarded. A garment was not considered at the end of its life when it was torn or faded, but only when it could no longer be repaired or repurposed. Textiles were valuable, the product of countless hours of labor, from growing the flax or cotton, to spinning the thread, to weaving the cloth, to sewing the garment. Your careful darning was an act of respect for that labor, a reaffirmation of the object's worth and its ongoing story in your family's life. While functional, the way a woman darned a sock or patched a knee could be a subtle, unspoken signature. Some used tiny, invisible stitches, a point of pride in their needlework. Others used a distinctive, decorative sashiko running stitch, even on hidden repairs, a private flourish of beauty in a utilitarian task. It was also common to hear older women say that you should mend with a calm heart, as stitches sewn in anger or frustration would never hold properly. The garment, they believed, would absorb your negative energy and the repair would fail, a folk belief that gently enforced a state of calm focus during the task. You fall into the rhythm of it, the push of the needle, the pull of the thread, the gentle tightening of the stitch. The world narrows to the space between your hands. The sounds of the river and the distant chatter of the other women become a soft backdrop to your concentration. There is no past, no future, only the present loop of the thread, building a new layer of strength over the weakness. Historians still argue whether this culture of meticulous repair, often falling on women, was a virtuous expression of environmental sustainability born of necessity, or if it was a burdensome, time-consuming demand that prevented them from pursuing other forms of work or leisure. Sitting here in the sun, the slow, repetitive motion soothing your aching muscles, the debate feels distant. This isn't a burden, it's a respite. It's a quiet conversation with the cloth, a promise of continued use. You aren't just fixing a hole, you are weaving a small piece of today's patience into the fabric of tomorrow's labor. By the time you tie off the thread and bite it clean, the patch is not a flaw, but a badge of honor, a testament to the care that holds your household together. The sock is now stronger than it was before, and in a small way, so are you. The mindful focus of your mending is broken not by a sound, but by a sensation, a single, fat, cold drop of water landing on the back of your neck. You look up. The bright, clear sky of the morning has been swallowed by a low, gray ceiling of clouds, moving in from the east with a silent, ominous intent. A collective groan ripples through the women on the riverbank. This is no gentle spring shower. This is the first, unmistakable warning of the rainy season, the tsuyu, and it changes everything about laundry day. Your entire routine, from the timing to the techniques to the very mood of the work, is dictated by the brutal, unyielding wheel of the seasons. The idyllic, sun-drenched riverbank of an hour ago is about to become a memory, replaced by a months-long battle against dampness and mold. You scramble, your calm stitching forgotten. This is now an emergency operation. You, along with every other woman, are a flurry of motion, gathering the half-dry clothes from the grass, folding them hastily, and piling them back into baskets. The goal is no longer a perfect, sun-bleached dry, but to get the laundry home before it gets utterly soaked by the downpour that is clearly moments away. The summer tsuyu brings a humidity so thick you can taste it, a wet blanket that smothers the landscape for weeks. Laundry done during this time never truly feels dry. It carries a persistent, chilly dampness, a smell of mildew that becomes the background scent of your home. You learn to hang clothes in the narrow, covered in gawa veranda, creating a forest of slowly dripping fabric that you have to navigate for days, hoping for a break in the weather that might not come for a month. This is a stark contrast to the other seasonal extreme you know all too well, winter. The mainstream historical fact that frames this struggle is the sheer lack of climate control in a 1920s rural farmhouse. Your house is designed for ventilation in the summer heat, not retention of warmth in the winter. Come January, the river itself is a different beast, partially frozen at the edges, the water so cold it feels like 1,000 needles stabbing your skin at once. Washing clothes in winter is an act of pure misery and minor danger. Your hands turn bright red, then numb, the skin cracking and bleeding. Breaking a thin layer of ice at the river's edge to access the water is the first chore of the day. The thought of plunging fabric into that water, of the aching cold that will seep into your bones and linger for hours, is a weekly dread that makes the humid struggles of summer seem almost pleasant by comparison. The winter laundry arsenal involves the use of daikon radishes. No, you don't wash with them. But some resourceful households would rub the cut end of a large, cold daikon on their chapped, cracked hands after a winter washing. The radish juice was believed to have a healing, soothing property, a small, stinging relief for the ravages of the cold. It was a folk remedy born of what was available, a testament to the constant search for small comforts in a life defined by seasonal hardship. In the summer, the battle was against insects drawn to the damp cloth. You'd sometimes tuck sprigs of mugwort or chrysanthemum leaves between the folded layers of stored linens, a natural pest deterrent whose faint, bitter scent would mix with the smell of mildew. As the first real sheets of rain begin to fall, you heft your basket onto your head and make a run for it, the gravel path already turning to mud under your feet. Historians still argue whether the relentless, seasonally-driven demands of domestic labor like laundry forged a deeper, more intuitive connection between rural women and the natural world, or if it simply represented another layer of vulnerability and hardship, binding their daily lives to the whims of weather in a way that was often brutal and unforgiving. Sprinting through the downpour, your barely dry laundry getting a fresh soaking, you feel the truth of both sides. You are intimately, painfully aware of the shift in wind, the texture of the clouds, the smell of impending rain, a knowledge bought with the currency of discomfort and ruined work. You burst into your dark, quiet house, the sound of the rain now a roar on the thatched roof. The laundry is done, but the fight against the season is just beginning. You lay the damp clothes out inside, already thinking of the charcoal you'll need to heat for the iron, a tool that promises a different kind of battle, one of heat and pressure, in a world that is suddenly, overwhelmingly, wet. The damp laundry, now draped over every available indoor surface, presents a new problem. In the humid stillness of your house, with the rain drumming a steady rhythm on the roof, these clothes will never dry properly on their own. They'll just linger in a state of chilly dampness, eventually developing the sour smell of mildew. This is where you turn to one of the most demanding and prestigious tools in your domestic arsenal, the iron. It sits by the hearth, not a sleek, electric wand, but a heavy, blunt object that looks more like a weapon than a household appliance. This is your teppan, a solid iron slab with a pointed tip and a handle, and using it is a ritual of fire and patience. You first have to prepare its power source. You carefully arrange lumps of glowing rantan, a specific, slow-burning charcoal made from oak, inside the iron's hollow body. Using a small pair of metal tongs, you transfer the embers from the main hearth, a delicate operation that sends a wave of dry heat into your face. Once the charcoal is settled, you close the small door on the iron's side. Now, the waiting begins. The iron needs time to heat, for the thermal energy from the charcoal to seep through the thick metal and reach the sole plate. You test its readiness by flicking a few drops of spit onto its surface. They sizzle and vanish instantly in a tiny puff of steam. It's ready. The heft of it is astonishing. Lifting it is a two-handed affair at first, a solid, dead weight that promises both transformation and danger. The mainstream historical context for this tool is the evolution of household technology in the Taisho era. While electric irons were already being advertised in Tokyo department stores, they were as fantastical and out of reach for a rural household as a motorcar. Your world still ran on fire. The teppan was a direct descendant of earlier irons heated directly on the fire, an improvement that offered more consistent, ash-free heat. Using it was a skill that separated the competent homemaker from the master. It required strength, endurance, and an intuitive understanding of heat management. You couldn't just plug it in, you had to tend to it, feeding it more charcoal if the heat flagged, knowing that a poorly heated iron would press wrinkles into the fabric instead of smoothing them out. These irons involved their secondary uses. Besides its primary function, the teppan was sometimes employed as an impromptu room warmer on bitterly cold nights. After a long ironing session, you might place the still hot, but cooling, iron on a ceramic tile in the main living area, its radiating heat a precious bonus before it went cold. There was also a superstitious belief, held by some of the older generation, that a new iron should be seasoned by first pressing a piece of pure white silk or hemp, a ritual to bless it and ensure it would never scorch a valuable garment. It was a gesture of respect to a tool that demanded so much respect in its own right. Now, the real work begins. You lay a dampened cotton cloth over your husband's best yukata, spread on a firm, padded mat on the floor. You grip the iron's handle, your muscles tightening to control its weight. The first contact is a violent, satisfying hiss, a plume of steam erupting from the fabric. You push, putting your whole body into it, guiding the immense weight in slow, deliberate strokes. It's a dance of pressure and heat. Too little pressure and you achieve nothing. Too much, or too long in one spot, and you'll scorch the cloth, leaving a permanent brown scar, a mark of your failure. The heat is intense, baking your face and forearms. Sweat beads on your brow, a strange counterpoint to the dampness you're trying to banish from the cloth. Historians still argue whether the adoption of such physically demanding tools, even as more advanced options existed elsewhere, reflected a cultural valorization of endurance and traditional methods, or if it was simply a stark indicator of the technological and economic isolation of the countryside. As you heave the iron for another pass, your arms trembling with the strain, the argument feels irrelevant. The iron is what you have. Its heft is the heft of your life, its heat the fire of your effort, and the smooth, crisp fabric it leaves in its wake is a small, hard-won victory against the relentless damp. The hiss of the iron has faded, its heat dissipating into the damp air of the house, leaving behind the quiet, profound satisfaction of finished work. The rain continues its gentle patter outside, a soothing rhythm now that the day's labors are over. The cleaned, dried, and pressed clothes are no longer a pile of chores. They are a soft, folded archive of your household's life, ready to be returned to their places. This act of putting away is not a mindless task of stuffing drawers. It is a final, thoughtful ritual, a conversation with memory and legacy. You handle each garment not just as cloth, but as a textile heirloom, a repository of stories written in thread, patches, and faded dyes. You pick up your husband's primary work yukata. The indigo is faded across the shoulders from countless days of sun. The elbows are reinforced with nearly invisible patches you sewn last autumn, and there's a small, stubborn stain on the cuff from last year's harvest festival. This isn't just a piece of clothing, it's a biography. You remember the sweat and triumph of the rice planting season embedded in its fibers, the way he slept in it during the exhausting weeks of the silkworm harvest. The children's smaller kimonos, now outgrown and set aside, tell a faster-moving story. You unfold one, your fingers tracing the tiny stitches, remembering the chubby arms that filled those sleeves just a year ago. These outgrown clothes are not discarded. They are carefully folded and stored with sprigs of insect-repelling herbs, to be passed down to a younger sibling or a cousin, the story continuing with a new character. The mainstream historical fact that gives this ritual its weight is the value of textiles in a pre-consumer society. Clothing was a significant financial investment, often representing one of a family's most valuable portable assets. A fine kimono could be worth as much as a piece of land. Because of this, garments were treated with a level of care and reverence that is hard to grasp today. They were expected to last for decades, sometimes generations, being let out, taken in, re-dyed, or completely unstitched and re-sewn into new forms. A futon cover becoming a work coat, a father's formal hari becoming a child's school bag. Your careful folding is an act of asset management, a preservation of family capital. The hidden messages sometimes sewn into the linings or seams. It wasn't uncommon for a mother, when making or mending a garment for a child leaving the village for work, to secretly stitch a tiny, protective charm, a scrap of paper with a Buddhist sutra written on it, or a single stitch in red thread, believed to ward off evil. It was a silent wish for safety, a mother's love made tangible and hidden away next to her child's skin. Similarly, the way a woman folded clothes was considered a reflection of her character. Haphazard, sloppy folding suggested a disordered mind and a neglectful heart, while precise, neat folds spoke of inner calm and domestic competence. As you place the last of the children's clothes into the large, fragrant tansu chest, you run your hand over the smooth, worn wood. Historians still argue whether this culture of preserving and repurposing textiles, which created such rich, layered heirlooms, was ultimately a beautiful, sustainable practice, or if it also fostered a kind of material and emotional conservatism, a reluctance to let go of the past that could stifle change and burden families with physical and sentimental clutter. In the quiet of your house, the argument feels distant. This isn't clutter. This is continuity. Each folded garment is a promise that the story isn't over, that the labor of today will literally clothe the tomorrows to come. The chest closes with a soft, final thud. The laundry is put away. The cycle is complete. But outside, The world is changing, and the faint, distant whistle of a train, a sound that was never here before, carries on the rain-filled wind, a whisper of a different future. The distant train whistle is a sound that doesn't belong, a metallic scar on the acoustic landscape of your world, and it makes the children, who are supposed to be helping you with the final tidy-up, stop and listen with wide, curious eyes. For them, the rituals of laundry day are not yet labor. They are a form of play, the first, crucial lessons in the life they are expected to lead. While you were at the river, they had their own tasks, a scaled-down, often messy, version of the adult world. Now, as you put the last folded linens away, they swarm around you, their small hands mimicking your movements, their minds absorbing the rhythm of the household without even realizing it. You see your 5-year-old daughter, EMI, carefully, painstakingly folding a small hand towel. The corners don't quite match up and the final product is a lopsided bundle. But her brow is furrowed in concentration, a perfect imitation of your own expression. She is learning order. Your son, 8-year-old Kenta, is outside in the covered Ngawa, using a small, child-sized broom to sweep the stray leaves and bits of grass you tracked in from your frantic run from the river. His strokes are over-enthusiastic, sending more dust into the air than onto the dustpan, but he is learning responsibility for the shared space. This is their classroom. The lessons aren't written on a chalkboard, they are woven into the fabric of the day, taught through imitation, gentle correction, and the simple, unspoken expectation that everyone contributes. The mainstream historical fact framing their childhood is the Meiji-era emphasis on universal education, which by the 1920s meant most rural children attended school for at least a few years. But the education they received at home was considered just as, if not more, important. School taught them reading, writing, and arithmetic, and a diluted version of national loyalty. But home taught them how to live, how to survive, and how to contribute to the Buraku. For girls, this meant a relentless apprenticeship in domestic management, from laundry and sewing to cooking and childcare. For boys, it meant learning the rhythms of the farm and the skills of a trade. Their chores were the foundational exercises of their future adulthood. Children weren't just given miniature versions for fun, they were expected to learn respect for the real thing. A child who carelessly left a tool out in the rain, or dropped a sewing needle, would be scolded not just for the carelessness, but for the disrespect shown to the object itself. There was a folk saying, "A tool forgotten overnight weeps until morning," a charmingly anthropomorphic warning to impress upon children the importance of putting things away properly. You find yourself repeating it now to Kenta, who has abandoned his broom to peer out at the rain, and he scurries back to prop it correctly in its corner, a small lesson in accountability taking root. You give EMI a small basket of socks to pair, a task that teaches her matching and attention to detail. She sits on the tatami, her small tongue poking out in concentration, creating little piles of paired socks with a look of immense pride. Historians still argue whether this system of immersive, task-based learning from a very young age produced exceptionally self-reliant and skilled adults, or if it robbed children of a true, carefree childhood, burdening them with adult concerns and rigid gender roles long before they could understand them. Watching Emi's proud smile as she presents her perfectly paired socks, and Kenta's puffed-out chest as he announces the Ngawa is clean, you see the former. But you also see the weight of expectation in their earnest little faces, a weight you yourself carried, a weight that is both a gift and a chain. They are learning the unassuming magic of this life, the same magic that leaves your hands raw and your back aching, the magic that holds the world together one folded garment, one swept floor, at a time. The last sock is paired, the broom is put away, and the children's energy, once focused on imitation, now descends into the restless fidgeting of exhaustion. The damp chill from the rain and the long day's labors has seeped into all of you, leaving a collective weariness that clings like a second skin. This is the signal for the day's final, and most cherished, communal ritual, the bath. It is not a private, hurried shower, but a slow, steaming, social reward, the yin to the river's punishing yang. You gather clean yukata, small towels, and the children, and you join the slow procession of women and children heading towards the village bathhouse, the sento. The men will have their turn later, after the fields are done. This is your time. The path to the sento is a different kind of journey from the one to the river at dawn. The mood is light, anticipatory. The chatter is less about gossip and more about relief. You push open the heavy wooden door and are immediately enveloped by a thick, warm fog, carrying the distinct, clean scent of soap and wet wood. The air is so humid it feels like breathing underwater, a stark, welcome contrast to the chilly damp outside. You pay the elderly attendant a few sen, your coins disappearing into a wooden box, and then you find your spot in the changing room, a shied space of laughing, chattering women in various states of undress. There is no modesty here, only a shied, unspoken understanding of the body's realities, the scars of childbirth, the muscles hardened by labor, the same tiredness in every pair of eyes. The mainstream historical fact that makes this ritual so vital is the architecture of the traditional Japanese home. Most rural houses, like yours, had no built-in bathing facilities. Heating enough water for a full bath over the hearth was an immense task, a luxury reserved for special occasions. The communal sento was therefore not a choice, but a necessity, a brilliant, efficient solution that provided a deep, hot bath for the entire community. By the 1920s, sento were ubiquitous throughout Japan, but in a rural village, it was more than just a place to get clean. It was a social equalizer, a neutral ground where the lines between households blurred in the steam. The tiled, steamy room was a perfect echo chamber, and it was famously a place where you could overhear the most astonishing pieces of conversation from the other side of the room, snippets of drama and confession floating through the vapor. It was also a place of minor, unspoken competitions. Women would notice who had a new tattoo, a luxury few could afford, or who was using a fancy, store-bought soap from the city, a small marker of status. There was also a strict, unwritten code about not staring, but also about not being overly shy. To hide your body was to imply you thought yourself above the common, shared experience, a subtle social faux pas. You sit with the other women and your children on the low, wooden stools, scrubbing yourself meticulously with buckets of warm water before you are allowed to enter the great, steaming communal tub. This pre-wash is a ritual in itself, a shedding of the day's grime, both physical and social. The children squeal as you pour water over their heads, the soap suds from their hair swirling down the drain, carrying the last traces of the riverbank with them. Then, the moment of bliss. You sink, slowly, into the almost unbearably hot water of the large cypress wood tub. A collective, soft sigh rises from the women already submerged. The heat is a physical force, melting the ache from your shoulders, unknotting the muscles in your lower back, turning your pruned, raw hands from the river back into soft, human skin. The steam clears your sinuses, the water holds you weightless. In here, there is no gossip, no labor, no seasonal dread. There is only heat and silence and the shied, wordless understanding of a day survived. This is the final, necessary purification, the warm, quiet heart at the end of the long, cold day. The deep, soaking heat of the sento has worked its magic, leaving your muscles loose and your mind pleasantly blank as you walk back home in the gathering dusk, the children clean and drowsy between you. The rain has softened to a fine mist, catching the light from the paper-shuttered windows of the houses you pass. Back inside your own home, the world is quiet, the only sounds the crackle of the low fire in the hearth and the steady drip of water from the eaves. The children are put to bed, their breathing soon evening out into the soft rhythm of sleep. This is the time for stories, Not the boisterous tales of the riverbank, but the older, quieter ones, the folklore that lives in the shadows and explains the world in ways that science cannot. Your grandmother, who lives with you, settles herself by the fire, and the stories she tells are not just for entertainment. They are the moral and spiritual framework of your domestic life, and they are deeply concerned with the very concept of cleanliness you've labored over all day. She begins, her voice a soft rasp like wind through dry reeds, with the story of the kami of the hearth and home, the camaraderie. This is not a distant, mountain-dwelling god, but a resident deity of your very own fireplace, who watches over the household and, most importantly, detests filth and disorder. A dirty hearth, she explains, offends the camaraderie, and an offended household god might bring misfortune, sickness, failed crops, or wayward children. Your meticulous cleaning of the ashes, your careful preparation of the fire, is not just practical. It is a form of devotion, a way to keep the protective spirit of your home content. The laundry, by extension, is part of this cosmic order. To present a clean, mended home and clean, mended clothes is to live in harmony with the unseen forces that govern your world. The mainstream historical fact that gives these stories their power is the deep-rooted presence of Shinto and folk Buddhist beliefs in everyday rural life. While state Shinto was being emphasized for nationalistic purposes in the cities, in the countryside, the beliefs were more localized and animistic. Every stream, every large rock, every old tree was thought to have its own kami, and the home was a microcosm of this spirit-filled world. Maintaining ritual purity through cleanliness was a way of showing respect to these innumerable beings. A poorly kept home wasn't just messy. It was spiritually dangerous, a breach of protocol in the delicate relationship between the human and spirit worlds. This folklore involves a specific type of tsukumagami, a tool that has acquired a spirit after 100 years of service. The story goes that a neglected or carelessly discarded laundry tool, like a washboard or a wooden bucket, could awaken, filled with a vengeful spirit. There are tales of haunted washboards that would be heard pounding clothes by themselves in the dead of night, a spectral reprimand for a homemaker's laziness. These stories served a powerful social function. They instilled a sense of respect and gratitude for the tools of daily life, ensuring they were cared for and never wasted, reinforcing the principle of motenai with a supernatural threat. Your grandmother's stories then drift to the spiritual consequences of uncleanliness on a personal level. She speaks of how lingering dirt and sloth can attract kega, a form of spiritual pollution or defilement that clings to a person, making them vulnerable to misfortune or illness. The rigorous cleaning of the body in the sento, and the cleaning of the clothes in the river, were thus acts of spiritual hygiene as much as physical hygiene. Historians still argue whether this rich tapestry of folk belief, which so intimately connected domestic labor to spiritual well-being, provided a meaningful, empowering cosmology for women as the guardians of the home's purity, or if it simply added a layer of superstitious anxiety to their already heavy burden of chores. Listening to the fire crackle and your grandmother's voice weave its old magic, you feel the truth is in the feeling, not the argument. The stories aren't a burden, they are an explanation. They give a deeper purpose to the raw knuckles and the aching back, transforming the weekly laundry from a mere chore into a sacred rite, a necessary spell to keep the darkness of disorder and misfortune at bay. Your grandmother's stories of household kami and spiritual pollution have settled over the quiet house like a fine dust, adding a layer of profound meaning to the simple, worn objects around you. Your gaze drifts from the dying embers of the hearth to the large tansy chest in the corner, the very one that holds the freshly folded laundry. In the dim light, it seems more than a piece of furniture. It feels like a silent guardian, a keeper of stories. The clothes inside are not just assets or practical necessities, as you considered them earlier. After the old tales, you see them now as something closer to heirlooms in the making, each thread a potential vessel for memory, each patch a seal on a chapter of your family's ongoing story. You get up and walk to the chest, your hand resting on its cool, lacquered surface. You don't open it, but you can picture its contents with perfect clarity. There is your mother's best kimono, the one she wore for her wedding and that you wore for yours, its silk now too fragile for anything but the most special occasions. The pattern of cranes and waves is faded, but the memory of her wearing it, the straightness of her back and the quiet pride in her eyes, is as vivid as if it were yesterday. That kimono doesn't just represent her. In a way, it contains her. Then there are the children's first kimonos, the ones they were presented at their shrine blessings. Tiny, impossibly small garments that held their squirming, newborn bodies. To discard them would feel like discarding the memory of their first breaths. The mainstream historical context for this deep, almost animistic connection to textiles is the concept of mono no aware, the pathos of things. It's a sensitivity to the transience of all things, a gentle sadness at their passing, and a deep appreciation for their beauty. In a world where objects were handcrafted and built to last, they accumulated a soul, a history. A crack in a ceramic bowl, a patina on wood, a fade in a fabric. These weren't flaws to be hidden, but marks of a life lived, evidence of the object's journey through time. Your carefully mended and preserved clothes were the ultimate expression of this, each repair a defiance of transience, a refusal to let the story end. The practice of yokai or obake associated with old household items. While some tools could become vengeful tsukumagami, cherished family heirlooms, especially textiles, were often thought to develop a more benevolent, protective spirit. A grandmother's favorite kimono, stored in the family chest, was sometimes believed to watch over the household, its spirit a comforting presence. There are folk tales of such garments faintly rustling in the dead of night to warn of an approaching fire or to comfort a crying child. This belief transformed the tansu from a simple storage unit into a kind of family shrine, a reliquary for the benevolent spirits of the ancestors, woven into the very cloth they once wore. You think of the work clothes you just put away. The patched trousers, the faded yukata. They are not yet heirlooms, but they are on their way. Every stain from a festival, every tear mended after a fall in the field, every time the indigo is renewed in the communal vat, you are adding to their biography. Historians still argue whether this cultural tendency to imbue objects with spirit and memory fostered a sustainable, deeply respectful relationship with the material world, or if it could lead to a kind of emotional hoarding, an inability to let go of the past that could paralyze a family and prevent necessary change. Standing before the closed chest, you feel the weight of all those stories, all those lives contained in thread and cloth. It is a heavy weight, but it is also a comforting one. It is the weight of continuity, the assurance that you, too, and your children after you, will become part of this soft, folded archive, your lives recorded not in ink, but in indigo and stitch. The comforting weight of history held within the tansu chest feels suddenly fragile, as another long, lonesome whistle from the train cuts through the night, clearer now than before. It's a sound that doesn't just travel through space, but through time, and it carries with it the scent of coal smoke and the promise of a different world. This is the fading ritual, the first, faint tremor of an earthquake that will eventually render the entire intricate, back-breaking, soul-fulfilling day you've just lived obsolete. The train is more than a machine. It is a needle, stitching the isolated patch of your rural village into the vast, impatient quilt of a modernizing Japan. And with that connection comes change, seeping in slowly, inexorably, like dampness through a thatched roof. You see the signs already, if you know where to look. Just last month, a traveling merchant, come from the city on the new rail line, set up a stall in the village square. Among his wares were bars of commercial soap, wrapped in bright, printed paper and smelling of artificial perfume. They lathered so easily, so abundantly, a marvel that made your rough, homemade seconds seem primitive and harsh. A few of the younger women, the ones who whispered about city fashions, bought them, a small act of rebellion against the old ways. And then there is the talk, the persistent rumor that a public water system is being planned, a network of pipes that would bring clean water right into the home. The idea is almost unimaginable. Water that doesn't require a trip to the well or the river. Water that flows at the turn of a handle? It sounds like a fairy tale, but the men on the village council speak of it with a serious, determined air. The mainstream historical fact that fuels this quiet revolution is the rapid industrialization and urbanization of Japan during the late Taisho and early Showa periods. The government and large corporations, the zaibatsu, were pouring resources into infrastructure, connecting the countryside to the cities to create a unified national market and a mobilized populace. The railroad was the spearhead of this effort. It wasn't just for people, it was for goods. It could bring factory-made textiles, canned food, and commercial goods out to the countryside, and it could take the younger generation away to the factories and offices of Osaka and Tokyo, draining the villages of their lifeblood. The communal riverbank, the shared knowledge of the indigo vat, the entire economy of self-sufficiency, all of it was built on a foundation of isolation that the train was systematically dismantling. As new, convenient products arrived, the old ways were not just abandoned. They were often actively discarded as symbols of a backward past. That beautifully worn washboard, the one that served your family for 3 generations? It might end up as firewood, its story ending not with a respectful retirement, but with a practical, dismissive crackle in the hearth. The Sento, once a vital hub, would see its business decline as homes gradually installed their own ofuro baths. The rhythm of the community, so tied to the collective labor of chores like laundry, would begin to fracture, replaced by the independent, private rhythms of the modern nuclear family. You look at your hands, the skin still rough from the day's labor. Historians still argue whether this great transformation, for all the comfort and convenience it brought, also represented a profound cultural loss, a severing of the intimate, knowledge-rich relationship people had with their environment, their tools, and each other, a disconnect we still grapple with today. The train whistle fades, leaving only the sound of the rain. The ritual is not gone, not yet. Tomorrow, you will likely still go to the river. But the seed of doubt has been planted. The unassuming magic of this day, the magic of cold water and shared struggle, now has an expiration date, and the faint, mournful sound of the train is its ticking clock. The train's echo has dissolved into the rain-soaked night, leaving behind a silence that feels different, charged with a new and quiet finality. You move through the dim house, performing the last small tasks of the evening, but your mind is no longer fully in the present. It is casting ahead, trying to imagine a future where the riverbank is empty, where the indigo vat sits cold and forgotten, where the only sound of laundry is the private, mechanical churn of a machine inside a home. The thought is as disorienting as it is intriguing. A life without this bone-deep weariness, without the raw hands and the aching back, it's a promise of liberation. But it also feels like a kind of amnesia, a forgetting of the songs the women sang while pounding clothes, the specific coolness of the morning mist on the river, the shade, wordless understanding in the steamy silence of the Sento. You blow out the last lamp, plunging the room into a soft darkness punctuated only by the gentle glow of the embers in the hearth. The smell of the clean, folded laundry stored in the tansu chest mingles with the scent of wet earth and wood smoke, a fragrance that is the very essence of your life. You lie down on your futon, listening to the steady breathing of your children and the soft, rhythmic patter of the rain, a sound that has been the constant soundtrack to this very long day. Your body settles into the mattress, every muscle reporting its fatigue like a soldier after a long campaign. The ache in your shoulders is from lifting the heavy, waterlogged futon cover. The stiffness in your back is from hours bent over the washboard and the iron. The slight throb in your hands is from the cold water and the coarse soap. It is a map of the day's labor, drawn on your very skin. And yet, within this exhaustion, there is a profound and quiet satisfaction, a solidity that you suspect a machine-made cleanliness could never provide. You didn't just clean clothes today. You participated in a ritual that connected you to every woman in your lineage, to the river itself, to the cami of your hearth. You wrestled with the elements and you won. You transformed the grimy evidence of a hard-lived week into neat, folded stacks of potential, ready for the week to come. The unassuming magic was not in the removal of dirt, but in the entire, intricate process. The shied struggle, the whispered secrets, the blooming indigo, the patient stitches, the final, purifying heat. It was a magic of connection, to your community, to your past, and to the tangible world around you. The world outside is changing, there is no denying it. The future whispers of ease and isolation, of buttons that summon water and machines that hum in quiet corners. But for now, in this moment, let that future remain a distant echo. Here, in the dark, with the rain as your lullaby, there is only the deep, owned peace of a day fully lived. Feel the weight of your own body sinking into the floor, as the weight of the day sinks into memory. The river will flow on, whether you are there to meet it or not. The stories your grandmother told will slowly fade, as all stories do. But the feeling, the solid, unspoken knowledge of what it means to care for a home and a family with your own two hands, with the help of your community, with the water and the fire and the earth, that is a magic that no machine can ever truly replicate. So let the rhythm of the rain slow your thoughts. Let the memory of the steam from the bath and the smell of clean cotton lull you into a rest you have so richly earned. Your work is done. The house is quiet. The clothes are clean. All is, for this single, perfect moment, exactly as it should be.